Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. After a month off last month because I was away on holiday, it is time for this month's Gemini release set, as Gemini Jets have just announced their December releases a few days ago. So, as always, we will check through these releases, see what I think of them this month. The good thing about Gemini is, I guess, that they release a lot less models than some of the other brands, and so we've only got 11 models to discuss, which makes this a lot more leisurely than on the NG video where I have to go through a huge number of models. Gemini releases are sometimes a bit like a big comfort blanket, in the sense that you kind of know what you're getting. It's fairly familiar. There's nothing that's going to be super surprising or unusual, but nonetheless there's still some quality stuff in here as well. So that's perhaps a nice way of saying it. I guess some people consider the Gemini releases to be super boring, but actually I think this year Gemini have had some decent models coming out. There's been a bit of crap as well, obviously, there always is, but it's not been a dreadful year. And again, this month, when I look at what they've announced, I'm seeing some hints of creativity here, some sparks, as well as the sort of stuff which just keeps the lights on for Gemini. Okay, subscribe to the video, or even like the video, and subscribe to the channel. Check me out at Airlines on Instagram and Facebook, and yesterdaysairlines.com, the website, central to everything. And lastly, 400 scale in detail, a great place to discuss 400 scale in detail, as the group suggests on Facebook, so check that out as well. But for now, let's move on and see what Gemini are giving us for Christmas. Okay, so it's the usual Airbus and Boeing and then everything else approach that I do in these videos. So we're going to start off with some Airbus products, or kind of Airbus products, because obviously these are really at heart still Bombardiers, but we've got a couple of A220 300s first up to discuss. We've got both Delta and Air Canada. So the Delta version is going to be registered N305 DU, and the Air Canada version is CGJXE. If we start with, I was going to start with them, but let's just do them together. I mean, the reality is, if we look at the releases of A220 300s in 400 scale, there have been 6 by Gemini prior to this. They have covered Air Baltic, they have covered Air France, they've covered Breeze. There's been the retro Air Canada, but there has also been both Delta and Air Canada in these exact liveries. So these models here are, in effect, re-releases of models which were made a couple of years ago, because the original Delta release was in 2020, and I'm pretty sure that the Air Canada release was that from the year before, maybe? No, that was also 2020 as well. So it's been a couple of years. There's probably a fair demand for re-releases of both of these, so you can't really criticise Gemini too much for doing that. In the time since they have been released originally, Gemini does appear to have modified the mould a little bit and provided a more detailed nose gear, at least, than it previously had. And if you look at the last couple of releases, they're a little bit more detailed. Having said that, it does also seem at the same time to have made them a little bit taller at the nose, which isn't necessarily a good thing. I've talked a bit about the A220 mold before, when I did the Breeze version in the video. Yeah, it's not perfect, and the cockpit printing is also not perfect, but it's not dreadful either. And I'm sure that these will both be popular. Incidentally, I really like both these liveries. I know they're both fairly common liveries nowadays, but the Delta's current livery is classy and attractive, and I love the current Air Canada scheme with the bandit mask. Just looks awesome. So I really like these schemes, even though they're big, ordinary airlines, and their mold's okay. It's just a shame in the sense that they've done them previously, but I'm sure there's strong demand for them out there. I'm going to put them both into Workhorse because they are re-releases primarily. They don't merit a higher score than that. Next up is an A319, and this one is in the colours of ITA Airways, or is it supposed to be called ITA Airways? I doubt it, it's probably ITA Airways, isn't it? But the Gemini A319, which is really jcwings A319, has got a lot of stick, much like the A220 has historically. They have, however, done some work on the nose, and a few of the releases have looked quite good. If you look back over some of the more recent releases and look at the pictures, they're not offending me at all. In fact, this United release looks really rather good. That is obviously helped in its looking good by the fact that it's got the IAE engines on it, which are better sized than the CFM engines which appear on this ITA Airways release. And you can see when you look at, say, even this Gemini publicity shot of the Allegiant here, that the engines do look a little large under the wing, and they do in first person. I've got a couple of CFM powered Gemini A320s, and the engines are a little large. But it's not the end of the universe. This mold is obviously inferior to lots of the A319s out there, but it's not the end of the universe. And ITA Airways has got this quite attractive blue iridescent scheme, which should look really nice as long as they kind of get the colours right, which you hope they will. I saw that Aviation 400 released this recently on an A350, and it looked really impressive. And I saw the actual livery in person at Amsterdam as well on an A320, and it did look really good. So you'd expect Gemini to get the colours spot on, because they probably have worked with the airline. And yeah, for that reason, I'm tempted to put this one up in the high flyer. The mould is not the most spectacular mould, but nobody else has made an ITA Airways narrow body until this point, so that's good to see a bit of new territory, and I like the look of it. So this one's, I think, might turn out quite nice. Going to put this one up in the high flyer despite the engine's being a little bit chunky. Next up, however, we're straight back in. In fact, this has been a very Gemini release set so far, and we're straight into like the most comfort area of Gemini releases, because it's an Emirates A380. It's the 50th Emirates A380 that has been made in 400 scale, and it is probably, looking back through the list here, good 40 of those has probably been Gemini releases. Just a few really old ones by Magic and Dragon, and a couple of Phoenixes here and there, and some Witty in the past, but they were a long time ago. The last well over 30 of these have been all Gemini Jets, but not often in the standard colours. Having said that, they did release a version just this year, A6 EUV, which was in the standard colours. This is another version, A6 EVC, wearing exactly the same scheme from the same year. You know, I can't get upset with Gemini for this. Emirates obviously are buying these, so why not make them? It makes sense. So I'm not going to get upset that it's in the release set here. It's a corporate deal. It makes Gemini money. You'd be a fool to turn it down if you were them. But I can't either wax lyrical about it either, sorry, because the mould is not the best A380 by some distance, and you know, they've done it this year as well. I mean, I'm going to put this one down in Gascars, which may be a little harsh, but the mould isn't that bad. But at the same time, it's been done before. Emirates, you know, no one's going to be excited about this. But Emirates are buying it, so fair play. So that's the Airbuses out of the way. Moving on, we've got a pair of 737-800s next. The first one is quite interesting in that it's for an airline that hasn't been made in 400 scale yet, and it's one that I know collectors have been asking for. It is Avelo Airlines, which is a relatively recent US low-cost carrier which is operating 12 737s now. I didn't realise actually that this at least kind of tentatively springs from what was Casino Express, which has started in the 80s. But it's really just a case of, I think, keeping the certificate and reusing the certificate through various different guys before it gets to Avelo. But anyway, that's kind of by the by. It's a classic kind of Gemini release in the sense of like exactly the sort of airline that Gemini would like to make. A US airline, a modern US airline, and I think it'll be super popular for that reason. Nobody else has made it yet. But obviously, what always looms in the background nowadays for 737-800s for airlines like Avelo or any others really that are being released by Gemini is the fact that NG models have got a much better mold than Gemini's current one is. So even though this has got a relatively nice scheme, it's never been made, it's new, it's going to be popular, it's difficult to get enthused about it because the Gemini 737-800 mold is so ordinary. And in fact, even when you look at the picture that Gemini's put out of the release, it even looks a bit like their mold in terms of where the engines are sitting on the wing. It just looks kind of like Gemini's mold, because when you look at Gemini's mold, it's like it looks a little bit flat. The engines are really close to the ground. The undercarriage is chunky, and the nose gear especially, and the nose is a bit pointy as well. It's just not a great mold. You know, 5 or 6 years ago, you looked at it and gone, "This is okay," but now there are much better 737s out there. Not just NG's version, there's also the Panda version, which is much nicer too. So there are alternatives. Will NG produce Avelo airlines? Yeah, hard to say. I imagine they probably will, given them a bit of time. So yeah, up to you if you want to take a chance and buy this one. But personally, it's difficult to get too excited about it myself. Having said that, it is an airline that's not been made, and it's one that's going to be popular with a lot of people. So I'm going to put this one into workhorse because I don't love the mold, but I don't really hate it, but I don't love it. It's very ordinary, but it is nonetheless a good choice of airline. So it's just gone in that crack between gas guzzler and workhorse, I'd say. But I'll put it into workhorse. The next one, however, is using the same mold. This one is Aeroflot's low-cost subsidiary, Pobeda, VP BQG. I get the feeling this model had been made a while back, because it seems like an odd release for Gemini to put out now, considering the war in Ukraine and the effect on Russia and our view of Russia. But it wouldn't surprise me if this model had been made months and months and months ago, and they've kind of accidentally got themselves caught up in an unfortunate situation here. It's not the first time they've made Pobeda either. They did make a model of a 737-800 in 2016. That one had the blended winglets. This one has the scimitar winglets. So otherwise, it's effectively the same aircraft. It's got all the same issues that I talked about with the mold on the previous Avelo release. Looking at the previous release of Pobeda, it looked okay actually. And actually, it was a model I was considering getting, never somehow really got around to it. Yeah, but I just don't love the mold. Nowadays, it's obviously not really up to spec, even though it's okay. And the fact that obviously this is a Russian airline, it's just not a good time to release it. I'm going to put this one down in the gas guzzler because I don't love the fact that it's being released, considering it's a Russian airline, and I don't really love the mold. And it almost is a re-release too, even though it's got different winglets. So yeah, this one's going to go down in the gas guzzler. So there are two more Boeings to discuss in this release set, and the first one of those is an Amerijet International Boeing 757 freighter. The aircraft is registered N818 November Hotel. Amerijet has got this kind of classic cheap line scheme, or at least it did. I'm not entirely certain if this is a current scheme or if this is the old scheme, but nonetheless, it's quite a nice livery. It looks quite good on this cargo 757. And Gemini have been releasing a few 75s recently using this ancient mould, which has been updated with new landing gear and aerials, and it still looks okay. Obviously, it's always going to be in the shadow of the ngmodels mould, which is far better. But this mould still is okay. It's got a good shape overall. It's got a bit of a wing seam. The undercarriage doesn't seem to still quite fit the mould, but it looks okay. And if you look at some of the recent releases, they look decent, you know, and if there weren't better NG versions of something hanging around, you know, I'd be buying them, but there are. However, there isn't of this one. Amerijet is an airline that hasn't been made with a 75 before, so I think this is actually a good release. I think it'll look nice. Looking at some of the pictures of the United 75, which has the winglets, but slightly different style of winglets, that release looked quite nice, and I think this one will look good too. I'm actually going to put this one up a bit into high flyer, joining the ITA A319, because yeah, it's a new airline. The mold's okay. It's not, you know, again, it's not the best mold in the universe, but it's something slightly different, it's something slightly interesting, and I think it'll be a nice model. The next release, however, I know will be a nice model because this is new. This is a DHL Kalita Air 777 freighter, but it's using this new interactive series mold which JC have been making for Gemini, and I think this is the first release of this that I can recall. I've not seen any others up to this point, except I think I saw some pictures of the sample, and I really like the interactive, as I've talked about beforehand. I think it's a great innovation. This DHL scheme is better as well than the ones which just have DHL on the tail. You've got the whole full body, yellow with the big DHL tiles, so the aircraft is going to look pretty nice. And it's going to be based off of the excellent jcwings modern 777 mold, which itself is awesome. So you're going to have a great mold with a really cool feature and quite a colourful, interesting scheme for an American carrier, which I'm sure a lot of people will like. So this one's crying out to be supersonic. I think this one will be a really nice model. So that leaves us 3 models to discuss. We've got 2 non-Airbus or Boeings, and then we've got the Gemini Max release for this month. So the next model that I'm going to talk about is a prop. It's a modern prop, and it is a Flybe Q400, registered GECOE. And I was surprised when I looked how many Q400s have been released by Gemini. There have been 30, or this is the 37th, which is surprising. The mold has gone through some changes, it seems. It seems like some of the early releases were really tail high, and the Q400 is a little tail high. More recently, they've sort of leveled out a bit, and in fact, even gone the other way, and some of them are a little bit nose high. But overall, the mold is a nice Q400 mold. Especially looks good around the engines and the wings, so that's great. Now, Flybe is an airline which historically has been really popular in this scale. I know people struggle to find old Flybe Q400s. This one obviously is not really in the same airline, it's just using the name and some of the collateral from the previous carrier. I saw it recently in Amsterdam. The scheme is not very inspiring, just a bit of purple on the tail and engines. It's really not that nice. But it is cool to see Flybe back in the air, and it is also nice to see Gemini being interested in regional airlines from Europe. I think this will be really popular with UK collectors, and it is a good release, I think. Good mold, decent airline, going to be popular. Yeah, this one's going to go up in high flyer, I think. If Flybe had a cooler livery, I'd probably put this one into supersonic, but I'm just going to put this one up into high flyer. Now, the retro release for the month is a Northwest Lockheed Electra. This one's registered N128US. It's wearing one of the early Electra schemes, not the very earliest actually, because I'm pretty sure the very earliest Electra scheme had a gold eagle on the tail. This one doesn't. It's the 5th Electra that Gemini have announced in recent months. The first one was an Eastern one last year, then there's been American Astrojet, there's the Braniff delivery scheme, or close to the delivery scheme, and there's been, just recently, last month I think, the proud or purposeful M colours of National. So they're making quite a good set of Electras here. They're all ones that have been made before by Aeroclassics, except for the purposeful N, which actually AC just made last month. I don't need them for that reason because I've got the Aeroclassics versions. The mold is better than the Aeroclassics mold, it has to be said, but it's still not perfect. And some of the QC I've seen has not been great. The AA's tail sat, the cockpit windows weren't printed very well in the Eastern, and I've seen some pretty weak landing gear attachments as well. So there's some quality issues here and there, I think, with some of these. But yeah, they look okay. They look okay. They're not as exciting as other options for retro airliners, as I think I've said before, that Gemini could have made and hadn't been made in the scale before, but they're solid releases, and if you didn't collect the Aeroclassics versions before, then these may be good options for you. But for me, I'm just going to put this one up into Workhorse. And that leaves just the single Gemini Max release for this month, which is a Boeing P8 Poseidon in the colours of the Republic of Korea Navy. And I don't usually get very interested or excited by military releases, obviously being a collector primarily of civil airliners. But I have to say that I really think Gemini and JC have done an excellent job on this P8 Poseidon mould. I think it looks excellent. And it is using a new base 737 underneath it. And it makes you wonder whether you will start seeing new 737s from JC and Gemini using this superior mould over their existing one I moaned about a bit earlier on. But they haven't seen them yet. And instead we've just got a few P8 Poseidons here and there. The mould's obviously not exactly the same. It's got different wings, it's got different tails, it's got all these wonderful attachments to it, and that's what makes it super cool. But you can see that the base fuselage and undercarriage of the aircraft is better than the 737, 800, 900, which Gemini are using at the moment. So it'll be nice to see them move their civil airliners over to this new mould or a variant of it. But ignoring all that, I think this is going to be a really nice release. For a military aircraft, this Korean 737 actually has quite a cool scheme. It's got a colourful Korean flag logo on it, and it's got a really nice tail logo as well, with a one, and I'm not sure what that is. What kind of bird is it? An eagle? It looks like an eagle to me. Over it, I think it looks really cool. I think this is going to be a really nice release. Go very well with the previous Gemini Poseidons that have been made for the Royal Australian Air Force and the Royal Air Force and the US Air Force, and there's probably one or two others. And somebody asked me the other day whether Gemini would make a Royal New Zealand Air Force version, and actually now I'm beginning to think maybe they will when the Kiwis get their Poseidons. But either way, I think this is going to be a superb release. I really like these releases that have extra bits, go the extra mile to be realistic, and the Gemini P8 Poseidon is much better than the Panda one. So this one's going to go up into supersonic to join that interactive 777. I think that's going to be super nice. And that's it for this month, guys. So we've had 11 models to look through. In some ways, it's the usual kind of batch. You've got a couple of re-releases, you've got a bit of Emirates, you've got some older molds which are still going strong but perhaps shouldn't be. But you've also got some nice airline choices. I think that Gemini are generally pretty good when it comes to colours and a lot of the quality detailing. And you've got some of these cutting edge interactive series molds and molds with a lot of detail like the P8 Poseidon, where they're benefiting from the capability of jcwings and being able to leverage that, and I think that's cool. So yeah, it's another decent month I think for Gemini, and actually been a decent year overall, I would say. So that's the Gemini Jets for December. I know that the jcwings announcements are going to be out in a day or two, and I also know that one of them is going to be in IL86, which will always please me. So keep an eye out for that video, which should be coming up in the next week or so. Until then, I'll see you. Have a good time and enjoy the World Cup. Thanks, guys. Bye.